talk is everything. It's every relationship in your life is a sequence of conversations. And if we can do each one of them even a tiny bit better, imagine the accumulated effect that would have on your life, on your relationships, on your work, on the world. This is what we all need to get better at. And it's going to happen in tiny little increments, tiny micro decisions. The decision to make that joke, that decision to ask that great question, the decision to let people have differing views and not get mad at them.
Okay, so joining us now on Open Book is Alison Wood Brooks. She's an associate professor and fellow at the Harvard Business School. It's a place I always wanted to go to, Alison, but I didn't have the balls to apply to it. We'll talk about that in a second.
Love it.
The title of your book is Talk, the Science of Conversation and the Art of Being Ourselves. And if you hear some hoarseness in my voice, I apologize. I'm a little under the weather with these young kids in the middle of the winter. So first of all, let's talk about this, okay? Because I love this book, and I think we have a hard time being ourselves. And I'm very good friends with Robert Greene, who I think you may know from the 48 Laws of Power and from The Art of Seduction and all the different great books that he's written. But he says this to me all the time, that we have good things in us and bad things in us, and we have types of conflict in us. And we have a very hard time articulating it to other people because we don't want to be perceived as bad people.
Yep.
So let's start there. But before we do that, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about your background so we can establish who you are for our viewers and listeners. And then let's talk about why we have such a problem being ourselves.
Yeah. So I'm Alison Wood Brooks. I'm a professor at Harvard Business School. I've been there for 12 or 13 years. No, I look impossibly young. I got my PhD at Wharton, and I'm a behavioral scientist. I created a course. I was recruited to Harvard to teach a course on negotiation. Did that for about 4 years, and then created a new course called Talk, which is the basis of this book and has sort of hit a nerve at Harvard and beyond. Before that sort of professional turn in my life, I'm an identical twin, which I think is not just a coincidence that I ended up becoming sort of fascinated and obsessed with conversation and studying humans, because being a twin is a weird and very lucky existence.
Hey everyone, it's Anthony Scaramucci here with some straight talk. Let me tell you, we've got 85% of our viewers who haven't hit the subscribe button yet. What's up with that? It hurts. Listen, I made my career by going all in. Right now, only 15% of our viewers are part of our subscribed family. So please take action. This helps us book more amazing guests. Hit subscribe, join our community, and let's turn these numbers upside down. Now back to the show.
Identical or fraternal or what?
Identical.
What does your twin do, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, her name's Sarah Carney. She runs a nonprofit called Prime Coalition. They've some professors of my colleagues of mine at the business school have written 2 cases about her, and I didn't even know it. So she's she's a very interesting person. I'm very lucky to know her.
Okay, so I have to ask this: when is your birthday?
March 12th.
Oh, March 12th. You almost okay. So you're a Pisces.
And it's our 40th, Anthony. We're turning 40.
Yeah, I feel bad for you. Okay, at age 61, I feel really bad for you guys. Okay, it's like the funny thing about 40, and I'll just say this to you: when I turned 40, I was like, okay, wow, I think I'm very old. I didn't start getting into the groove until 40. So life begins at 40, Alison. You're going to be just fine.
Thank you. That's very empowering.
So yeah, and you know that already anyway. You're just psychological. Let me tell you the bad part about being 40. I turned 60 last year. I just turned 61 yesterday. I was just getting used to 60.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I was just getting used to 60, and then boom, I'm now 61, right? So before you know it, you're going to be 45, okay? So don't worry, okay?
You're very youthful, Anthony. Very youthful.
Yeah, so there's a lot of work being done, okay? I can give you, if you're nice to me, because one of the problems with me is I don't have a problem being myself, okay? So this is why I want to talk to you about this. I want to understand what this is all about. But if you're nice to me, I'll give you all my health and beauty tips, okay?
Oh, I can't wait. I want them all. Yeah.
But you got very good skin from this YouTube video, I can tell, okay?
But not for long. I mean, I'm getting to the age when I'm going to need help soon.
Yeah, I'm not worried about you right now. Tell me about why people can't be themselves. You're hitting a nerve. You said you're hitting a nerve. I know why you're hitting a nerve. because people can't be themselves. So tell me why.
There's a million reasons that we can't be ourselves, especially in conversation. I mean, when you're talking to somebody else, we're constantly doing a curation task. We're deciding the full contents of our mind is incredibly complex and sophisticated, and there's so much you could possibly say to somebody else. And we're making these little micro decisions of like, well, what tiny fraction of what's in my mind am I going to say out loud to another live human being? And that curation decision is really fraught. I mean, we're making a decision of who am I going to be to you in front of you? I'm doing it right now. I'm like, should I be scientist Alison? Should I be professor Alison? Should I be basketball player? Should I be mom Alison? And we're constantly toggling and making these micro decisions every time that we speak in a conversation.
Is there a mean Alison in there?
I think there's a mean Alison. She's I think back in middle school and high school, I had more of an open battle with mean Alison, and I hope that nice Alison really won. But I do feel like in my mind, I still, like everyone, have to fight against judgmental reactions to other people's behaviors. But it's become more second nature to not let her out so much.
Right. So you habits. You got to work on these habits.
That's right.
I mean, again, I'm not putting this on you because there's a mean Anthony in there. There's a jealous Anthony in there. There's an envious Anthony. There's a rude Anthony. There's an arrogant Anthony. There's all different types of emotions, but there's certain emotions that we want to project to the world, that we're nice and kind and we're philanthropic. Yeah. And we don't want to project those other emotions. And when we get caught doing that, we make ourselves feel bad, don't we?
Yeah, you do. Now, there's a potential for great humor in it, right? Acknowledging that there are all of those versions of you inside and sort of letting them leak out in moments when it seems like you're going to say like, hey, I'm going to tell you something true right now, right? Like, here's something that's living within me. Most people wouldn't let you see this, but I'm going to let you see this little piece of me. There's potential for real connection and humor
Okay,
there.
but when you do that, don't you feel like you're more connected to somebody?
Yeah.
So when you're like more vulnerable with somebody, you're letting them in, and all of a sudden you're able to establish some trust with them, right?
It's so funny. I have a colleague at Harvard. Her name is Leslie John. She studies self-disclosure. She has a book coming out next year called Reveal, and it's very much navigating this spectrum of transparency and sharing and opacity or not sharing. I think about it constantly in terms of like, what do we decide to say, and where there's also magic in keeping things unsaid, right? And knowing that you're so close with somebody that they understand what's happening in your mind, even without you saying it.
Yeah, but you don't want to say stuff because what ends up happening is you don't want to be overly judged either, right? Like if you came from a broken home or you came from a abusive family or whatever it is, you put all that stuff in the closet, right? You want to project something that isn't. So in the conversation that you and I are having, has your mind wandered a little bit? Because in your book, you say that 24% of the conversation time, the mind is moving on or wandering to other things.
My mind has wandered so much. I mean, part of my 40-year-old awakening has been a realization of my intense ADHD. So like all people's minds wander, particularly mine. You have so many books in your background and a little Yoda, and I'm reading that I'm wondering about the car. You also said, yes, we're managing the impression we make on other people. My mind wandered. I've been thinking about Erving Goffman and his theory in the 20th century about impression management and saving face. Like my mind is going all over into the stratosphere all the time. If
you saw my entire office, you would know that I am a train wreck of a mind. Okay. I am ridiculously disorganized. If I showed you the shit thrown in here, but that car is actually from Superman 1. So I'm a big Superman enthusiast here. You see that?
Is it a baseball glove?
My wife and I are actually in that picture on the bottom there. I had the artist painted in.
Oh, I love that.
Okay, and so that's Superman and Muhammad Ali fighting. These headsets are from my podcast. Okay, if you look over here, this is look at the mess here.
I love it. There's so much potential for distraction. Has your mind already been wandering? How much has your mind been wandering?
Yeah, no, my mind has totally been wandering because I'm trying to figure you out because you're presenting something, but you are something else too. And so I'm trying to figure it out. Maybe I need to read the book Reveal as well, right? Because a lot lot
But
going
every
on.
every person you talk to is so many different people, and everyone has multiple selves. Everyone knows so much, and the only way you're going to figure me out is by asking the questions that you actually want answers
so
to.
but aren't you as a person, it's a more generic question about people, aren't you born a certain way, Alison?
You know what? As a psychologist for a long time, I thought not. I thought everything was learnable and trainable and you could develop better habits. And then I had my own kids, just like you did. And it did change my perspective. They do come out quite different from each other. So I think I've softened my view on what's the balance between nature and nurture. And particularly in the context of conversation, my students ask about this all the time. Aren't there people that are just born good conversationalists? Aren't they just naturally charismatic? Aren't they extroverted? Aren't they gregarious, life of the party? And I think to some extent, they're not born that way. I mean, no one's born knowing how to even have conversation, but some people pick up on the feedback all around them and get better at it faster than others. But we can all get better at it.
What makes somebody charismatic?
Oh my God. All the things in the book, every little thing. Often when we think about people who are charismatic, they're really great listeners and they're really good at calling back to things. They think about other people and they call back to stuff that you've experienced before. They're curious. They want to hear about it. They want to reminisce. They want to make things. They also seek to make things fun. They don't let conversations get boring. That's the L in the talk maxims. The L is levity. So they tend to be really good at levity. They're good at listening. Good at asking questions, good at picking topics that will be interesting to their partners, not just to themselves, and then sensing when the topics start to lose steam and move to something else. You're really good at that. You move topics fast.
Well, because I only got 30 minutes with you. I want to have 5 hours. I want to be like a Joe Rogan conversation with you, but I've only got 30 minutes. I only got 30 minutes, so I got to talk fast. I got to think about what I'm saying, right?
Yep, it's exactly right. So, but this is something that charismatic people do. They tend to switch topics more quickly until they land on something that's really juicy and really exciting, and then you can kind of stay there for a little bit longer.
Well, I'll tell you a fun, quick story. So Bill Clinton and I have a little bit of a relationship. I invited him to one of my conferences, and he was like, "You're good on TV. Do you have a media coach?" And I said, "No, I don't have a media coach." And he said, "Hey man, Tiger Woods has a golf coach. You got to have a media coach." And so I said to him, "So who's your media coach?" And so anyway, he introduced me to his media coach about 12 years ago, and I did a 1-year course in media training.
What did you learn?
I'm going to tell you what I learned. Okay. Shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Okay. Particularly if you're moderating something, shut up and listen, and you'll be more interesting to people if you shut up and listen. And the other thing I learned is talk more slowly. You won't say the word or okay or any of these verbal tics that we have as we're trying to form our thoughts if you just talk more slowly.
But people get put a lot of pressure on themselves to get rid of those verbal tics, which I understand. When my students listen back to their recordings of their conversation, they're mortified by how many disfluencies, stutters are there. Which is true. If you're doing sort of podcasting or one-way speaking, ums and uhs are distracting. In natural dialogue between real people in their lives, those disfluencies serve important purposes. They often signal when someone's...
You're 1,000% right about it. In fact,
it's so important. Like it shows that you're feeling uncertain about something and that your partner should wait for you to sort of clarify.
So much so do I believe that, just going back to the media coaching, I had gotten myself to the point where I said no ums and okays, and the media coach said to me, "You sound like a robot.
No one wants to interact with a robot.
You have to feather in some ums and okays."
Yeah, it's exactly right.
People are expecting some ums and okays, but in a public speech, they want less of them. Let's put it that way. But how do you become a better listener? So you've got students. What do you tell your students? How do you become a better listener?
Listen, for decades, people have been talking about active listening, this idea of using nonverbal cues like eye contact, smiling, nodding, leaning forward to show someone that you're hearing them. That's good. That's like listening 101. But to really be a charismatic, responsive, intensive listener, what you really need to do is fight against your mind wandering, which you and I both do intensively. It's part of why I love conversation, is that it's like the challenge of trying to stay engaged. How can I make this interesting for you, but also for myself? So doing that hard work of making it engaging for everyone. But then, and this is what I teach my students, and this is like listening 201, advanced listening, you need to speak your listening out loud. You need to repeat what you've heard someone say. You need to ask follow-up questions. You need to paraphrase what multiple people have said in a group. You need to call back to stuff that you've talked about earlier in the conversation or earlier in your relationship. Those are the only undeniable signals that you've actually heard the other person. Smiling, nodding, leaning forward. You can do those things even if you're thinking about Yoda or your grocery list. You cannot repeat what someone said or ask a follow-up question if you weren't intensively listening to them.
I mean, it's well said. And so since I am listening to you, you're curious about Yoda. So I'll just tell you that my 7-year-old gave me that because it's from The Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, Dad, put this in your office. It'll make you smart like Yoda. Okay, so hopefully
Did it work?
A positive aura. I don't know if it's working or not. Okay. But I hope so. I mean, I hope I'm trying to be smart.
Do you? Let me ask you a question. On any level, do you feel like putting tchotchkes in your office is a great topic seed, so that someone like me will then say, "What's the deal with Yoda?" Yeah.
Yes, but I'm also a child. Okay, I am very in touch with my inner child. Okay, so here, okay, I'm going to show you something. This will end up in the podcast.
Please.
Okay, something I'm very proud of. Can you hold on one second?
Of
Okay,
course.
this is very embarrassing. So, do you recognize that? Okay, and
Is it
for
a
people
hookah?
listening in, do you recognize that? You see, you're too young to recognize.
Oh, I
it.
Dream of Jeannie. It's Barbara.
Oh,
It's,
you are. Yeah,
oh
okay,
my
see?
God.
Okay, and you see, so Barbara's been on my podcast, and I've had dinner with her in LA several times. And for people listening in, I have the original Genie bottle from I Dream of Jeannie.
What?
There's about 70 of these, and Barbara signed it for me. See, she signed it
That
there.
is gorgeous.
And if you were my vintage, if you were 61 and you were a male,
She's the dream.
heterosexual, you had
She's
a
the
crush
dream.
on Barbara Eden. And so my wife, who has no problem with me having dinner with Barbara Eden, okay, I will say that she brings her 91-year-old chaperone, aka her husband, with her. But it is what it is, right? I have to.
How old is Barbara Eden now?
94.
Wow, I bet she's still a babe. Does she have a belly button? Because they never showed her belly button on the show.
Yeah, she does have a belly button. I haven't seen her belly button, to be honest, but she does have one. But I'm bringing this up because, like, my office is a throwback to my childhood. Because I want to come into my office. I want to think about what I was doing as a kid and what my inner child was.
Does that help you bring yourself to conversations and to your work?
Yeah, I think it's important, don't you?
Yeah, I do. Very much so.
So you mentioned humor a lot in this book.
I do.
Are you a humorous person? I mean, I know the answer, but I want you to articulate it.
Who can say that about themselves? That's crazy.
You are. Of course, you're a humorous person. Okay?
I live as a core family value. I don't think I would have survived my childhood if I didn't learn to keep up with the silly humor in my family.
Okay.
I live for humor. In fact, a huge part of the value add that I hope I bring to the Harvard Business School is like a relentless insistence on levity. I think it might be one of the biggest weaknesses of probably a lot of organizations, but also Harvard is like the only way that you can make great progress and feel connected and alive and safe is if you feel a spirit of play. And that comes largely from humor. If people aren't funny, they can just find it through just like warmth, I think, too. But yeah, I live for levity, Anthony.
What's your favorite TV show?
Right now or forever?
No, tell me.
Right now we've been watching Silo, which I will say is in this theme. I also just watched The Diplomat with Kerry Russell. And Silo is Rebecca Ferguson. I'm really liking seeing these protagonist, main character, female characters emerge who are physically tough, super smart. They have skills. They're nuanced. They're interesting. And actually, in both of those shows, they have male partners who are also interesting and high achieving, but aren't the main dish. They're a side dish. So I love watching that.
Okay, I've watched both those shows. I love both those shows. I do a lot of traveling, so I'm always on a plane.
Did you notice that about those shows?
I have noticed that about those shows, but I would say that those shows, listen, we probably shouldn't get political, but I'm not a very woke person.
It's all right.
What I like about those shows is they're not woke. They show women who are tough and strong, but they're not patronizing these women in these shows. Do you see what
Right.
I'm saying? And
Yeah.
I think that's a very important message. If you're
I like
in
that.
Hollywood listening, you want tough, strong women, and you don't want virtue signaling. You don't want patronization, if that makes any sense. You know,
It does.
And
It does. How do you think other shows patronize women? Or what are they
well,
doing right?
Listen, if you go to Broadway now, they will put the whole spectrum of people on the stage as a virtue signal. There'll be very heavy-set people in the dance troupe. There'll be very different types of people. There'll be men and women that shouldn't be there, okay, but they're there. And I think we have a tendency to do this now as a form of virtual signaling as opposed to just talent.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think people be mad at me for saying that, you know, and I think the cancel culture is ebbing now. Finally, I think people are finally saying that's not going to be the thing, you know?
Yep.
So, but hopefully that continues. All right. We got a couple more minutes. Apologies. Let's talk about apologies. Did we apologize to each other too much or too little?
Too little. Too little. There's a lot of discourse. There's a lot of
because, you know, people born in the 1940s that are men, they don't apologize.
I know it's a real problem.
That's a sign of weakness for them to apologize.
I know I think it's a real problem. Until recently, so scientists hadn't studied real conversations between real people until probably the last 5 or 10 years. We've studied public speaking and like pretend interactions for many decades, maybe even centuries. But studying real transcripts between real people and real relationships is a thing that's only possible now at large scale. And one of the things that has jumped out at me and at all scientists is like, we have not studied apology behavior in real conversations. And when you do, and you look at people in real relationships, the people who apologize frequently and well have better relationships. And there's almost no evidence from real conversations that refusing to apologize or neglecting to apologize is ever better than apologizing.
So, have you ever read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People?
Of course, yes.
Okay. What does he say in that book about apologies?
I don't remember what he says about apologies. Does he say anything about apologies?
Yeah, he says that you have to apologize. He says that the minute you apologize, remember, if you read Robert Cialdini's book, The Psychology of Influence. Cialdini, if you read his book, what does he say? He says that there's a common bond that we have in terms of reciprocation. And then the second bond that we have is in our vulnerability. If we can share a piece of ourselves with another person, we can establish trust. And so the combination of those two things create bonds. They create relationships. And so what Dale Carnegie said is that when we offer up an apology and we make an admission that we're actually human and we're wrong about something, it makes us more human and more endearing to the other person. But it also gives the other person an opportunity to do us a mitzvah, which is to forgive us and to move on and also to accept their fallibility in situations. You know?
Yeah,
couples that can apologize to each other for various indiscretions or they usually stay together. You know, there's a very funny expression. You can be right or you can be married, Alison.
Yeah, exactly.
Before?
Exactly.
So
yes.
You have to eat a little bit of crow in life. Okay, so.
Yes, and apologizing is hard. People don't like to do it because it makes yourself vulnerable to the other person. They don't have to forgive you. But that's not the point of making an apology. The apology is saying, look, I see that you've been harmed or you've been hurt or something as bad has happened. And I'm sorry for that. I don't like that you are hurting. And then they can control how they respond to you, right? You don't have, actually in the book, we talk about the study that found that asking for their forgiveness is not a particularly effective thing to do in the moment. You should really focus on the other person and say, look, I realized that this was hard for you or you're hurting in some way or I harmed you in some way. And for that, I'm sorry. And then let them decide whether they want to forgive you. And it's hard to do. It takes a tremendous amount of strength to make yourself vulnerable in that way to other people and to possibly admit that you did something wrong. Okay.
So this is stuff that is really got a very popular course. It's going to be a best-selling book because
I hope so.
No, it will be. Of course, it will be, and you know it's going to be, and it's going to be because it's real, and people need to hear it, and it'll help people get comfortable with who they really are, which is the reason why we wanted to bring you on the podcast.
Yeah, I do
Okay,
think.
don't say you hope so, by the way. Okay, you have to manifest.
Oh,
that it's going to
definitely.
be.
It should be. It should be.
It will be.
I
It will
know
be.
that the framework is effective because I've seen it work with so many students already, right? Like I've been now teaching this for 5 years, and it is remarkable to see how learning about the intricacies of these little micro decisions you make at every turn of every conversation, how it really changes people's lives. It's wild. And people come in, just like you said, people come in with different strengths and weaknesses. Some people are funny and some are not. Some are good at asking questions, some aren't. Some are good at focusing on other people. Some are insanely selfish and self-centered. Whatever your strength or weakness is, this framework is helpful.
Okay, so if you've listened to any of my podcasts, we pick 5 words from the book, and then we ask the author to respond in a sentence, a word, something that comes to mind. I'm going to say the word, and you're going to respond. Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
So if I say the word asking, you say what?
Delightful.
Okay, give me more context. So you have to ask people things, right?
You got to ask people things. We all need to ask more questions, especially follow-up questions, open-ended questions that start with what rather than why. Why questions can feel accusatory. So what are you doing later today? What are you excited about? What were you thinking about when you had breakfast this morning? These types of questions are delightful and extract a lot of information. Why questions like, why did you have cornflakes for breakfast? Why are you going to pick up your kid later? What there can feel accusatory. So ask more questions.
All right, it's good. It's a good segue to my next word, topics.
Topics are everything. I think that might be the most novel part of the book, meaning like this is a really new science, the topics piece of the book. We are making topic choices at every moment of every conversation, not just like, oh, what are we going to talk about at the beginning? No, every time you're speaking, you are deciding whether to stay on this topic or switch to something else. And we can all make those choices much more effectively.
Okay, the L for levity. Levity.
Levity. It's not about being funny. It's about finding the fun, making it fun for people, because conversation requires mutual engagement. It cannot be boring. So it's not about being funny. It's find the fun. You can do that with humor, but you can also do it with warmth, compliments, switching topics, just focusing on the other person.
What about kindness?
Oh, what's not about kindness? It's something that kindness is a word that we all learn to treasure and cherish as children. And then we never really figure out how to do it in practice. I think in the book, we put out a nice, very concrete way to think like a kind person, act like a kind person, talk like a kind person through respectful language, receptiveness to opposing views, which can pop up at any moment in any conversation, even ones that are supposed to be fun, and listening, using your words to show people that you're listening to them. Those are kind things.
TALK, talk.
Yeah. I think the talk is everything. It's every relationship in your life is a sequence of conversations. And if we can do each one of them even a tiny bit better, imagine the accumulated effect that would have on your life, on your relationships, and on your work, on the world. This is what we all need to get better at. And it's going to happen in tiny little increments, tiny micro decisions. The decision to make that joke, that decision to ask that great question, the decision to let people have differing views and not get mad at them.
So the book is awesome, by the way. And I got to tell you something. I am very impressed with you because you are an old soul. You're not talking with 40 years worth of wisdom. There's a lot of insight that you're providing. What are some of the people in your life, before I let you go, that you've read or that you've gotten some insight from? You know, I mean, it could be as old as Dale Carnegie. It could be as new as Robert Greene. Or
yeah, I love people. I'm blessed with so many smart, loving, wonderful people in my life that have been influential, starting with my twin sister and amazing parents, all the way to my colleagues at Harvard. I have a wonderful friend at Harvard named Mike Norton, who's just an absolutely brilliant psychologist. He wrote a book last year called The Ritual Effect. We have this sort of fight club. It's Mike Norton, Todd Rogers, who wrote a book called writing for busy readers, Leslie John, whose book Reveal is coming out next year. And we get together almost like a little fight club of behavioral scientists, and they've really shaped how I see the world and think about humanity, and think about how to do good in the world, how to make a small positive dent in the world. There are so many other unexpected things. So I invite a lot of visitors to my class, including, you mentioned Broadway, but we have some like freestyle rappers come to my class. I've learned a lot from people who do improv. So Kelly Leonard, the Second City, is a good friend. And Anthony Scaramucci and Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did this show called Freestyle Love Supreme. They come to my class and teach my students about freestyle rapping. I mean, if you can freestyle rap, you're definitely going to get better at conversation.
It's great stuff.
Yeah.
Listen, I really appreciate you coming on. The title of the book is Talk, The Science of Conversation and the Art of Being Ourselves.
Yeah.
It's by Alison Wood Brooks. Thank you so much for being on Open Book.
Thanks for having me, Mooch. Good luck with those little kids.
Thank you. The next person I interviewed was a woman from Harvard Business School. She wrote a book called Talk, and it was about the conversations that we have with people. Her name was Professor Alison Wood Brooks. So tell me, Ma, what do you do all day? You talk on the phone, right? How is it possible for you to have call waiting and every time I call you, the phone is busy? How is that possible? It's like a switching station, right?
Now I'm 88, so the phone is a very good pastime. But when I was young, I was edgy. I used to drive a motorcycle, and I loved it, and I didn't have a helmet, and I liked the idea of my hair blowing. When I was 6, I used to wait for my brother, who was named the Ghost, and I've been on it since I was 6 years old, and I still love it today. And I used to horseback ride, and I worked in a beauty parlor that was fast, and I had to quit because I was edgy enough to do something wrong.
What did you do wrong in the beauty parlor?
I didn't do anything wrong, but I could have done. There was things flying around.
Oh, you mean men were making the move on you?
Yeah, and it was a fast-moving shop. It was very, very fast, and I had to quit because I was edgy. Okay. When I was young, not now. I even they used to say that I look like Natalie Wood. What the hell is it? They used to say to me. All right. And they used to try to make my hairstyle like that. And I do have pictures where she had that hairstyle.
I'm definitely going to need therapy after these podcast conversations, for sure. But do you think you're a good listener, Ma, or what?
Yes, I do.
Okay, tell me what makes a good listener.
Well, I used to read quite a bit when I don't read so much now, but I used to read quite a bit, and I used to read like about Truman, Van Gogh, Roosevelt. I used to read very interesting books. Now I don't.
Mm-hmm. Why not?
Now I read makeup books.
Oh, you like reading about makeup?
I love reading.
But you didn't answer me though. What makes you a good listener? Are you a good listener or not really?
It depends on the topic.
Okay, so what makes a good listener if it's not you?
If it's not me?
What makes a good listener?
You're a good listener. You're a good listener because you go forward and you absorb things. You don't reflect stuff.
Okay.
And I think that's a good listener.
Okay.
When you can absorb what people are saying of any walks of life, you become a good listener. You don't reflect it.
Hey, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, here's another one right up here that you might like.